All right, my clock just hit the 12 o'clock noon hour, and that's when this webinar is supposed to get started. So I want to thank everyone who's here on time for joining us today. My name is Matt, and I'll be moderating today's session. Welcome, everyone. This is our third Career Edge webinar, part of a four-part series created by your Business School Alumni Network. Through this four-part series, we're hoping to provide you with an in-depth look at current industry trends while also helping you brush up on your professional skill set. All webinars are archived on the Business School website, and in the prior two, we've taken you on a tour of what's hot in the Denver metro area and helped you maximize impact of your resume. So for today's webinar, we are focusing on building your personal digital brand. Okay, first and foremost, questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. So depending on how you're viewing this webinar and what version Zoom you're using, the Q&A can be anywhere on your screen, but look for the questions and answers button on your screen, click it, and then you can type in your question there. So again, my name is Matt Fleming. I am a Business School alumni and currently work as a program manager for the JP Morgan Center for Commodities. I'll be moderating this, and as a fun fact, this is the second webinar I'm hosting. We're really excited about that. Our presenters today, we have Emily Edwards and Rob Humphrey. Emily is on the marketing team for CU Boulder as an instructor of marketing for CU Boulder, where she launches hundreds of brands every year, and that, of course, being her graduating students. She's passionate about innovation and digital marketing, and a fun fact about Emily, which you'll all be able to confirm shortly, is that she is a Southerner turned Coloradan with no Southern accent. Excellent, Emily. And Rob, with us today, is joining us from LinkedIn, where he's a college to career expert. And a fun fact about Rob, he's an aspiring backcountry snowboarder. It's a dangerous aspiration, but more power to you, Rob. So anyway, we're going to let Emily kick off right now. And Emily, the presentation is yours. Go right ahead.
Good deal. All right. Thanks, Matt. So guys, you'll have to tell me if I'm living up to this fun fact or not. Let me know if my Southern accent comes through at any point in time. So anyway, glad to be with you today. And where I want to start our conversation is discussing the idea of brands. And my professional background, which Matt did not mention, but my professional background is really in building consumer packaged goods brands like the ones that you see in the grocery store aisle in front of you. And I think it's useful to start our conversation there because it turns out when we think about how to build great brands, many of the fundamentals apply when we're talking about brands in the grocery store like Coca-Cola. And the same fundamentals apply to building our own personal brands. So let's start with a question about brands. Why do brands exist? I would say firstly, and really most fundamentally, the purpose of brands is to streamline our decision making. They help us to focus in on making the right choices based on what we care about most. So in an aisle of hundreds of toothpastes, I can quickly zero in on the Aquafresh brand because I know it, I love it, and I've bought it before. On top of this, great brands connote quality. Great brands can inspire us. Great brands make us feel connected and included. And great brands give us the confidence that the products that we're purchasing and investing in will actually work as promised. So my question as we think about the purpose of brands is, don't these same fundamental benefits appeal to an employer who is sifting through hundreds of profiles on LinkedIn, sifting through hundreds of resumes, searching for the right brand or the right prospective employee to join their organization? Aren't these employers also looking for quality, faster decision-making, inspiration? So what I want to transition to now that we've made this connection between brands in the world around us and our own personal brand is a very powerful tool that marketers use to build brands. And that tool is the brand positioning statement. So in the context of today's call, we'll talk about the personal brand positioning statement. So brand positioning statements are very powerful as a tool because they allow a brand manager to make intentional, purposeful choices about how we want our brand to be perceived in the world around us by others. So we define our brand position by answering 4 simple questions. First off, who are we targeting? Or in the context of personal branding, what types of jobs or companies are we hoping to connect with? Second question we answer is, what is our comparative set? Or who are the competitors that we hope to compare ourselves against in the job search? Third, what do we want to promise to deliver with our personal brand? And then fourth, what are the reasons to believe that we offer potential employers that our brand is trustworthy and will perform as promised? So let's look at this through the context of a brand in the grocery store in the world around us. And it's a brand I'm interested in right now. It's a brand that after 35 years is choosing to reposition itself. And I would say, isn't this relevant when we think about personal branding, since so many of us try to reposition or pivot ourselves in terms of career change? So the Diet Coke brand made an intentional choice, like so many other brands, in 2018 to target millennials. And specifically, it's deciding to pivot and change the comparative set. So no longer does Diet Coke want to be seen as a sugary soda brand. It wants to change its positioning to a brand that is really focused on the sparkling beverage category. It promises consumers that are these millennials individualism and self-expression. And you can see in the images below how every single touch point that Diet Coke offers its consumers, whether it's a new redesigned skinny package or 4 unique quirky flavors, or creative and quirky advertising with actress Haley Magnum. You can see how each one of these touch points consistently reinforces this message of individualism and self-expression for millennials. So you can see how making these types of intentional choices in terms of your brand positioning statement can be very valuable when you're defining your own personal brand. So specifically, if I want to define myself as a self-starter with grit, versus as an analytical strategist, I would make very different choices in the way that I represent myself and my personal brand. Simple things from the type of font that I select on my resume would be different for the problem solver with grit than they would be for an analytical strategist who's highly polished and buttoned up. Likewise, the location that I might select for networking meetings would be different. So for the problem solver with grit, maybe a grittier location like the Denver Beer Company is appropriate versus the analytical strategist who is really focused on being polished. So in that case, maybe an artisanal coffee shop like The Source would be a more appropriate spot for networking activities. So when it comes to building your personal brand and thinking purposefully about your brand positioning statement, I've got a few tips and tricks that I'd like to recommend to you. My first recommendation is to think about your brand or your logo in all of your communications and really consistently representing that. So you can see how in my resume and cover letter, my email signature, the way that I treat my name is very consistent. I've got the same font, I have the same bolded kind of branded appearance, and that consistency can do many, many favors in terms of building your brand, in terms of your communication strategy. Second tip that I have in terms of building your brand is to make sure that you're consistently representing yourself in the same way. So what a good tip for this is making sure that your resume deliverables, your bullet points that describe work you've done in past jobs, there's some strong consistency there to the way that you're representing the past jobs that you've done on your LinkedIn profile. Likewise, you can think about using LinkedIn skills and trying to cultivate endorsements that help to ladder back and support your brand promise. So for that analytical strategist, you could imagine if I go to that person's LinkedIn page, I would want to see skills that go back to their ability to analyze data, their ability to think strategically about data. And then my final recommendation that is a best practice for building your personal brand is to make sure that you consistently send thank yous and express gratitude for anyone's time as you're going through the job search, whether that is time over a networking coffee, or if you give a resume to a colleague to review and critique. I'm surprised by how many of my students I meet with on a year-to-year basis to review resumes, to go through their personal branding content, and how very, very few thank yous I get in the context of a follow-up note or an email. And I think the folks that do follow up and express gratitude really stand above the rest in building their personal brand. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Rob, who is going to walk you through some more specific recommendations for building your personal brand on the oh so important platform of LinkedIn.
Hey everybody, it's Rob Humphrey. Glad to join. Speaking of being grateful, I'm grateful for Colorado University Denver Business School for having me on this call, and very happy for all of you attendees on the call. I'm talking to you, Amber Moreland, Anita Norick, and the other 100+ people that have joined. Listen, take a look at your LinkedIn profile if you have another tab open, and if you don't, just consider this question. Would you hire you? If you hesitated at all, just follow along with me because I'm going to show you in 7 steps how to master your personal brand on LinkedIn. There are 7 elements to mastering your personal brand on LinkedIn. And the first one is having a LinkedIn profile. Probably a stark indicator of my social life, but I've looked at many of the profiles of the people that are attending today. I'm talking to you, Chris Wazinski, and Bridget Mullen, and all the rest of you. I've taken the attempt at looking at as many as I can. So your LinkedIn profile consists of a lot of different things, mostly of the things that you input, but it also includes a lot of information about what you search for, how you interact with things like jobs, for example, content updates, or in-mail over time. So keep that in mind because over time you're going to see the benefits of these interactions come to life. But first off, you need a great headline, right? Just like Daenerys Targaryen has, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. You need a confident headline. You can also take another approach for sure and basically spell out what you do in a nutshell, like my friend Salim up in Chapel Hill does very, very well. The most important takeaway for your headline is be yourself, be confident, and know that in order of priority, that's one of the things that recruiters look at most often. Why is this so important, by the way, this whole LinkedIn profile, and particularly the headline? Why? Because recruiters are looking for you at all time. In fact, 98% of the recruiters, corporate recruiters, and agency recruiters on the planet use LinkedIn not just once a day, but many times during the day. The question really is, will they find you? Element number 3 is the summary. You can very easily take, in the example of Taylor Gosk here, who's a freshman at University of North Carolina, literally take your profile from sort of this unknown generic brand to something spectacular and interesting. The summary is a super, super important part of the equation, by the way. Members with up-to-date summaries get 5 times more connection requests than the average, 8 times more profile views, and 10 times more messages. This is this empire building effect, or this effect of people finding you versus you finding them, that's so critical. Element number 4, of course, is education. You probably spent a lot of money on your education at CU Denver Business School, or someone did, right? So get it on there. And when I say get your education on there, do a few things here. One, make sure that you have the University of Colorado Denver Business School, or whatever school you have gone to, on your profile in the type ahead. Number two, make it come alive. You have a lot of beautiful surroundings. There's a lot of ways to do that. We support at LinkedIn the ability to put pictures onto the profile in every aspect of the profile, and education should be one as well. Think about it this way. Someone comes up to your profile, they see you giving a lecture or presenting to your peers a presentation, or just this wonderful picture of the school that reconnects them with your brand. So element 4 is education. By the way, you're 20 times more likely to be found by a recruiter by having your school, degree, and graduation date, or anticipated graduation date, on your profile. 20 times more. Element 5 and 6, I'm missing the number 5, but detail orientation is not a skill of mine. Element 5 and 6 are a professional headshot and a cover photo. The cover photo is the thing behind, in this example, my son's a very nicely done professional headshot. Big respect to Amber Moreland and Sandy for having really great professional headshots. I want to challenge both of you accomplished ladies to actually get a profile photo on there. I'd love to see you do that, and everybody on the call for that matter. If you're at a loss for what to do, just grab the school's one. I'm sure that the fine folks at your school have this kind of utility, right? So a professional headshot and a cover photo will get you the following: 9 times more connection requests, 21 times more profile views, and 36 times more messages. Big bonus points for the cover letter. And if you need some examples of really good profile covers, look to Dan Gold's profile. He's the executive director of alumni relations at CU Denver, and has a fantastic background cover. You want to go up to Boulder? Maybe you don't. I don't know, but take a look at Matt Duncan's profile cover photo. It's unbelievably cool, as well as his personalization of his profile photo. So there's some examples for you. Element 7, of course, is skills. Skills are the thing that drive your mobility in your current company. They're the things that drive your movement from your degree to a job, your career to college, cause a career transition, or whatever what it is. And you need to get your skills there on LinkedIn. If you're, for some reason, missing key skills that our employers are looking for, you just don't know what those are, LinkedIn unveils a study every year where we look at over 1 billion transactions of people migrating from job to job, and we identify the top skills for that year. And interestingly enough, one of the skills that made its debut on that chart just last year for the first time ever was data presentation. Data presentation. This skill of data presentation is in the number 8 spot of the most sought after skill amongst employers. Now, I got to imagine for a second, if you're going to CU Denver Business School, you're probably pretty good at data presentation. You just haven't put that skill on your profile. So you can use LinkedIn's tools, or the number of different tools in the world out there to get those skills, or just simply add them to the profile. Pretty simple. So those are the 7 elements of creating your profile. Those are the 7 elements that are going to help you master your brand on LinkedIn. Not complex. However, the majority of y'all don't ever do that. So I want to challenge you to get out there and get those things mastered. And once you have that done, it's time to build your empire. And this is so easy to do. It's so easy to do because LinkedIn has added so many features that make it simple. So as you go about building your empire, know this. There are 3 types of relationships. And for anybody that's watched Game of Thrones, you're probably by now picking up on some of the metaphors. But listen, there's 3 types of relationships that matter. One is people that basically are ride or die people, right? And Jenna Metzger, I appreciate your interest in the work I've done with the game and throws analogy, so thank you. Listen, ride or die people are the people that, you know, when they're in a meeting with your boss, and I experience this all the time. I work out of my home in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I know I have this team that I work with, and many of them are ride or die. I know they're going to have my back. When someone says that Rob Humphrey's a little quirky, they're going to say he's an amazing guy to work with. And we all have a few of those people, right? We all have a few, and they're very important. But largely, we have a couple other types. Weak ties, which are people that are a degree away from us. And in many respects, these are all the alumni of your school, or the people that you're in school with now that are going to go on to do all kinds of amazing things. These are the people that are the power brokers of your career, right? And so the allies and the weak ties are super important. The only other type of relationship, right, are enemies. And those are the people, to use a Game of Thrones analogy, that will stab you in the throat. You want to stay away from those people, right? We're not about that. So weak ties, allies, and of course, enemies. Those are the types of relationships. And let me show you a couple quick ways to start nurturing and building that relationship empire. First is follow companies you aspire to work for or are interested in working for. Our own talent recruiters at LinkedIn work very hard to garner a following of our own company page. You should be doing the same thing, just following companies that are of interest to you. Once you start doing this, you're going to find all of a sudden LinkedIn will start recommending things to you. And that's the part of the puzzle I had gotten to earlier, which is, well, what's the benefit of putting all this stuff in? Well, the more you interact, the more it gets conditioned to figure out what you're most interested in. You'll find some really interesting opportunities pop up. Certainly go follow CU Denver Business School. If you're not following, you should be, right? Because now you have a feed of what's going on at the school, and whether you're there now or later. Next up is follow members. Now, I'm not talking about connecting with people and getting more connections. I'm talking about people you can follow right now. Go follow 3 people on LinkedIn right now. Maybe it's Ariana Huffington, maybe it's Jeff Weiner, but it doesn't even need to be influencers, right? It doesn't need to be the president of your school or your CEO of your company. It could be some of the people I had mentioned. It could be some of your teammates. It could be the fine people that are doing this presentation, like Emily Edwards. These are the type of people that when you go and follow them, it's going to, what I call, condition your feed. It's going to allow you to start to see updates on people that you're interested in or aspire to work with or be like, right? And then lastly, the thing I want to leave you with in terms of empire building is the biggest secret on LinkedIn, where you can go and find all of the 100,000-ish CU Denver graduates. You can actually go to LinkedIn's alumni tool for free and see the largest longitudinal study of career outcomes in the world. And with this, you can start to use it as a crystal ball into the future. So if you're getting your MBA and you want to work in finance, right? And that's something you aspire to do, you can easily go and go through this visualization of data and figure out, well, where is everyone that went to my school in finance? Where are they at now? And how did they get there? And then, of course, you want to reach out to them. 94% of the time, when someone reaches out, especially with a custom message to an alumni, they're happy to respond. Happy to respond. So I've shared with you very quickly the 7 elements to create a great personal brand on LinkedIn and a few ideas about empire building. With that, I'm going to thank you. I want to thank CU Denver Business School for having me, and I'm going to turn it over to our moderator so that we can take some Q&A.
All right, great. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Emily. That was awesome. We've had quite a few questions roll through. I do want to point everyone's attention to the chat box where Emily posted her branding questions that she went through. Thank you for that, Emily. And of course, a copy of the presentation and recording will be handed out to everyone who registered for this presentation afterwards as well. So first quick question, Emily mentioned it, the comparative set, and then Rob gave a way to search through alumni, but is there a way to search in more broad terms, the comparative set of people, of jobs that you're looking for, and not have it filtered just by the university?
Yeah, is the question about LinkedIn job search?
Yeah, the question would be, based on Emily's four areas: target market, comparative set, brand promise, reason to believe. Is there a functionality within LinkedIn that you can search for that comparative set outside the alumni network?
Yeah, sure. So it's really easy to do, actually. So I'm double clicking on the alumni piece because I think it's so important. There are three ways to find a job, right? There's one, hey, I know someone or a relative is going to hook me up, and that happens 1% of the time, probably less than that, right? Then you can just apply for jobs. The most powerful way is using alumni connectivity. I went to Ithaca College, small school in upstate New York, probably never heard of it, in the shadows of Cornell up there. But I could tell you this, when I reach out to people that went to the same school I did, it's almost like this bonding that occurs, right? So that's the alumni piece. But more broadly, we have the largest job search engine in the world. In fact, we're just layering in a feature now that aggregates salary information about those jobs as well. So my advice is to build a comparative set in particular is to do two things. One, start following those companies that are competitive. And if you don't know what they are, you can simply look at a company on LinkedIn, and on the right rail, you will see similar companies. So our algorithm is based on recommendations that are similar to what you're exploring on LinkedIn. So one way to do it is start following companies. By way of doing that, you now have access to those companies' jobs and can sort of correlate the company competitive set to the jobs. Universally, my suggestion is to follow companies and then create job search, save job search alerts on LinkedIn in a way that keeps this feed of jobs coming to you regardless of whether you're happy or not looking or whatever. Hopefully that makes sense.
Awesome. No, it does. That's great. Thank you. So first question I'm going to throw out to both of you, and you guys can fight over it. My job straddles two areas, specifically tax and information technology, and I'm applying for jobs in both areas. So how should I present myself on LinkedIn without looking inconsistent when I focus the resumes for two areas differently?
So Rod, I'll take a quick stab at it, and then I think you'll have probably more specific, better recommendations. But I think it's a challenge thinking about how you position yourself when you're really looking at two different target areas or target markets for the job search. And my guidance would be to try to find consistent skills or those consistent brand promises, and think about how could you leverage the consistency between, in this case, tax and IT, in terms of your headline on LinkedIn. So maybe there's something that you want to focus on. Maybe you're a detail-oriented team player, and something like that could really straddle both areas. I'm not sure what it would be, but that's my guidance, to look for consistency and to build that kind of consistent profile on LinkedIn. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, to echo what you're saying, for sure, that consistency is paramount. But also it sounds like a really interesting opportunity. I mean, I did a quick search here while we were fielding that question. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of people that pop up that have that kind of combination. I think it's sort of this killer combination that is worth sort of building an interesting headline around. So I think. Echo what you say, but I also think it's an amazing opportunity to build like a really kick-ass headline around this very unique combination.
So, hey, Rob, how important are endorsements, and how do you solicit them without looking vain?
So there's this whole, like reciprocity thing at play. And when we first launched endorsements, a lot of people were kind of like, oh man, this is not what I was expecting. And since then, we've really worked hard to make sure that endorsements have more credibility or more validation. The way we do that, and it's important to know this, the way we do that is we actually are asking the question, when you're endorsing someone now, you'll see, this may not be ramped up across the membership of 550 million people yet, but you'll see, well, how are you confirming this person's expertise? Did you actually work with them or not? And of course, we kind of know that on the back end, like we know where everyone works and so on and so forth. So because you've input that. So I guess the answer is this, endorsements are becoming more important. And I would say that if you follow the what my wife calls the sort of the logic of common sense, you'll start to find out that it'll naturally occur, and you'll naturally be endorsing people that actually have those skills. And what the expectation would be is that the people closest to you in your network, even some weak ties to some extent, would be reciprocating, but they'd be much closer to the field of view of what you've actually accomplished. A long-winded way of saying endorsements are good, they're getting better. I wouldn't be too concerned about trying to amass them like likes on Facebook, but rather let the algorithm go to work for you as you achieve new skills and new experiences.
Rob, I think you just gave us a topic for our next webinar: the law of common sense.
I don't have it. My wife does. You can't learn it, apparently. If you could, someone let me know. I'd take that course.
Hey, Matt, can I build on one of the things Rob was discussing there?
Yeah.
Okay, so the last part of the attendee's question was about how do I solicit endorsements without really, looking like I think too much of myself or looking like I've got a big head. And I think it's perfectly legitimate if there are specific skill areas that you want to be endorsed for within LinkedIn to actually solicit those endorsements. And I've had so many students and former colleagues reach out to me and say specifically, I'm looking to, promote my expertise in this area or this skill. Would you be willing to endorse me in this area? Or a student who has finished a class project in a course that I've taught and said, hey, look, I thought this project was a great way for me to understand financial acumen. And is that a skill that you'd be willing to endorse me for based on your experience working with me in this project? So from a perspective of someone that has endorsed others, I would say, as long as the request is made humbly and graciously, then I don't think you run the risk of looking vain.
So then, just staying on this topic, if you are endorsed very highly in one area and not in another, does that in itself look strange to recruiters? And then if it does, should you go ahead and try to boost up those lower endorsed areas?
Listen, this is Rob. I wouldn't over-engineer this. I think essentially maybe that's what Emily was saying. I would put myself in the lens or the seat of a recruiter. I mean, they've got a rec for a job. They probably have 50 of them, right? And they're looking first and foremost at headline information that's in the summary, because that's very, very searchable information. That's why it was one of the fundamentals up front. And then they're starting to look at skills as a way to get that initial screened in list to sort of more granularity. So again, I wouldn't overemphasize those as much as I start thinking about LinkedIn not as a sort of dynamic resume, but rather a publishing platform and a platform for you to start building, your empire. That's what I would start thinking about. Any ways to sort of differentiate yourself. And if I could, I'll share a very, very, very quick story. I promise it'll be quick. I met with a fellow one-on-one recently, college MBA, about to graduate. He said, Rob, I'm interviewing with Amazon next week. What's the number one, how can I differentiate myself from the other 100 people that are on campus lining up to interview? And I said, this is not that complex. All you need to do is write an article on LinkedIn, a short article, and basically expand on 3 things that Amazon could do better, or 3 things Amazon's doing great. Then when you walk in the door and you talk to the person, you're the 49th interviewee, you can say, actually, hey, I just wrote an article on the top 3 things you could do better. So I think it's those types of things that are going to push you leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else on that list more so than everything else.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That whole law of common sense, because a lot of the questions are around endorsements and how do you kind of stand out from the crowd, and I'll ask this one. It says, should LinkedIn title headline list your current job position / a quirky explanation of what you're currently doing or what you're working towards / looking for in your career? And I think you kind of answered it just then, where it's like if you can target it so that you will kind of float to the top, and if you can't, I think go the quirky route, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm sure Emily has input on this. I'll say one thing though, having been a recruiter, I'm a recovering recruiter. In fact, I spent a lot of time in Broomfield in the mid to late 90s hiring a lot of tech people out there for a company called Sun Microsystems before they were acquired by Oracle. And what I'll tell you is this: in the list for like MBA graduates, if everyone puts the same headline, I'm an MBA candidate, or I'm a, CU Denver Business School, class of whatever. If everyone puts that in there, recruiters develop atrophy. They only see that headline, and all of a sudden they see one that says, I'm an IT and tax mastermind or whatever, and then they obviously already searched MBA. You all of a sudden are at the top of the list. So consider that. The headline should be something other than probably what you think it is.
Yeah, so I'll offer my 2 cents on the headline. I think the headline in LinkedIn is such a valuable statement of how you're positioning your brand, how you want your brand to be seen by the outside world. I do think it needs to relate to your current position, but also give a nod to where you're headed in the future. And the person that asked this question mentioned the word quirky, and I do see a lot of LinkedIn headlines that are more quirky, but I would go back to this idea of how do you want your personal brand to be positioned and perceived by potential employers. And maybe quirky fits if you're in a creative industry or an industry where you think that could add some value to the potential employer. But I'd say there are plenty of industries as well, especially in business. If you think about tax accountancy, for example, based on the person that asked the earlier question, I don't know if quirky is necessarily a fit when we think about building a brand for that particular industry. So I think your headline really has to link back to how are you positioning yourself? How do you want your personal brand to be seen? Both today and in the future.
Awesome, great. So we still have about a couple of more minutes time for question and answer. So when it comes to personal information on LinkedIn, what is the right amount? How much is too much? If you don't put your cell phone number on there, do people think you're strange? I know I'm not the only one, at least I hope I'm not the only one, who's getting bombarded with spoof phone calls from area codes that I may be more likely to answer because it's the same as mine. Where is that line on personal info?
Yeah, so I mean, privacy is super important, right? I don't need to educate anybody on that. So for all the sort of like things I've been through in terms of like this discussion on privacy and personal information, make it simple by getting into the settings and privacy piece of LinkedIn. It's not super complex, and just deciding you have your own sort of manifesto or whatever guidelines on this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to provide my phone number and email inside my summary, which you should never do, by the way. But you should go into settings and privacy and just sort of toggle on and off some of the switches. For example, when you're doing a mass update in your profile, you may not want to broadcast that to everybody. I don't include my phone number. That's just a personal guideline, right? I also don't accept invites from people that don't send a custom message. I just got literally right now, a great custom message from Tim Balzer. I hope I'm saying your name right. MBA, who's a MSIB candidate. And it was a great message. I'm like, yes, I'm going to accept that. When someone doesn't have a photo or doesn't customize the message in any way, I don't accept it. So I think, it's guidelines, right? You got to make up, just like a brand has guidelines, as Emily had stated, you've got to decide what you're going to do and what you're not going to do.
Excellent. All right. Well, I guess that makes sense here. Let me look through.
The other thing I wanted to mention, now that I'm looking at Tim's profile, and I hope you don't mind me doing this, Tim, I'm doing it anyway, but everything you have that represents your personal brand on LinkedIn, when you look at it from a mobile device perspective, that's going to make a very, very big impact. 67% of all unique visits on LinkedIn are now mobile. So I mentioned Tim because when I looked at his connection request by way of mobile, in his summary, it said, "My ultimate goal in life is to leave a legacy." I didn't see everything after that. So I immediately, I'm a little ADD, but I immediately wanted to see the rest of his story in his summary, which is fantastic. So those are the little things, little branding elements, as ambient as they are, that make this impactful difference.
Rob, you said something before that struck me. You said, put yourself in the shoes of a recruiter. And I kind of shuddered a little bit because, I don't know, recruiters. But a question came to mind when you said that. How many actual human beings are playing the role of a recruiter looking through LinkedIn versus getting a computer-generated sample of things? Like, I know being quirky and trying to separate yourself from the crowd, but where does that lie on these automatic searches that they're probably running versus actually humans looking through profiles? Are you an actual human, Rob? I guess is my first question.
Sorry about that. I was like, "Where's the mute button?" It's like, I wish we were on video right now because it'd be so funny, right? It's like I've never done this before. Yeah. So listen, can't give you a lot of detail, but I'll tell you this: there's over 250,000 recruiters on LinkedIn, and a vast majority, a very large percentage of them, are real humans. They're all real humans, are actually on LinkedIn more than a few hours a day. We don't share engagement metrics, but there are a lot of people out there that are constantly on there. Yes, there is definitely a percentage of things that are sort of automated. And I refer to this as recruiter atrophy. They're great people. They're great human people. But many times they fall into the sort of, I'm just going to start sending out notes to the same people. I'm not even going to read their profile. And they're targeting, and it becomes, innocuous. It becomes sort of like, why aren't they like actually customizing this? It's because they're overworked. They have so many things going on. So I don't know. I don't see a large spread sort of issue with that. I think most of the people you're going to hear from are real people, either recruiters or, listen, they're hiring managers. Many times hiring managers jump onto LinkedIn and they're not going to wait around for a recruiter, and they're going to go start searching. The question is, are they going to find you or not?
All right, great. Well, I guess that will have to be the last question. We'll wrap this up. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, participants, for your time this afternoon. We will be sending a follow-up survey for your feedback at the end of this, and you'll have to go through the survey to get more information on how to get connected with the Alumni Network. That's my understanding, at least. So please do that survey. It's very important. We do archive all of these webinars on the website, on the business school website. If you go to About Us and then Alumni, you can see the Career Edge webinar series. And that's also a great way to find out about other events happening here at the business school. Stay connected. The next webinar is March 29th. I don't know if I'll be moderating that one, but we'll be networking and executive interactions will be the focus of that one. All right, so everyone have a great weekend. I hear the mountains are getting some snow, and hopefully I'll be up there with you guys. All right, take care.